Hello, Soumeya.
Hi, Katharina.
Such a
How are
pleasure to finally have you on that fireside chat. For such a long time, I wanted to do this.
I am so happy. We've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, I know, right? Maybe for the audience, could you just start to present yourself? Tell us what you're doing. Where you based?
That's a complicated
I
question.
know, but it's so interesting.
So my name is Soumeya Rachedi. I'm the founder and CEO of Nxt Evolution, a UK-based advisory firm. We do ecosystem development, community building, and support leadership development around the African continent and the Middle East. So our clients are investment firms, accelerators, and governments ready to develop their innovation and tech ecosystems. So we build strategic partnerships for them and help them design their strategy to develop their communities, basically. And yeah.
And you're so good at it. I just want to put this out in the universe and on social media.
Thank you. So yeah, we developed our frameworks for a while. And to the question, where am I based? The company is based in the UK. My tax base is in Paris, but I haven't been living there much. So I follow the contracts and opportunities, and I spend more and more time in Africa and East. So it's been Dubai, Jordan. I am now in Cairo. Algiers and Johannesburg were very big lately, and in the next few months, going to be Nairobi and Abuja, hopefully.
Yeah, out and about all the time. I barely ever catch you in person, actually. So yeah, I wanted to jump on this quick fireside chat because it's Christmas, everybody's super tired. So I just wanted to have a little bit of a lighter subject of discussion than talking about what's the right valuation for which business, etc. And I wanted to talk to you about entrepreneurship because this is basically the subject over which we met a couple of years ago. We more or less launched our businesses at the same time and then connected and became friends. Um, so the question that I would like to put out to you, and more specifically to you, because you will have a very different training from mine, and also much more of an insight into psychology and things of the like, is like, do you think that entrepreneurship is for everybody, and also how has been your personal journey so far?
I love this question because we're also living in this era where entrepreneurship is being promoted a lot as if it is a wagon that everybody should jump onto and just become entrepreneur. And I want to be the advocate for entrepreneurship for everyone, but I really think that entrepreneurial skills can be valuable for everyone and anyone. So for me, entrepreneurship is not for everyone for a very simple reason. It's a very uncomfortable journey. It's a
It's
very,
not
very, it is a very uncomfortable
uncomfortable.
journey. Yeah. It is a super addictive journey. Like, I love being an entrepreneur. I love the stretch and the discomfort that it's bringing. I love the growth that I'm experiencing through
Well, the
becoming.
real question is, are we masochists?
That's a very good question. And the answer might be yes,
No.
we are. So, love it. I love the expansion I'm experiencing as a person, as an individual. I feel like through entrepreneurship, my heart is becoming bigger to the world. My
Really?
connections are becoming.
Yeah.
It's changed my outlook into the world, and I love it for that because basically what we experience through entrepreneurship is everything but just selling. It's beyond just selling a product or designing a product. It's way beyond that. So yeah, my response is it's not for everyone, probably not for everyone. Entrepreneurial skills are valuable for anyone and everyone who would like to experience some kind of growth or just be aware of the evolution that is happening in their lives. And yeah, that's does it answer your question?
It does. Interestingly enough, this morning I had a networking call with somebody who founded a company in the ESG space. You know, so like I'm very active in this, and the gentleman is a little bit older than me. So he already built and sold his first company. So he's got kids that are probably like 16, 18 right now. And his kids came to him and said, like, yeah, look at the entrepreneur on TikTok, they're making so much. He was like, it's not that glamorous, you know, and if they would be that rich, they wouldn't be jumping around on TikTok, trust me.
Yeah.
I think that's a very valuable feedback. You know, if they were millionaires, they would not put themselves out. Not every millionaire is a Kardashian. You know, just like they don't put themselves out there. So yeah, I can just concur. I don't think it's for everybody. It's painful and difficult. I think that there are very rewarding things, but these rewarding things need to be in line with what you want for your life, meaning the freedom to eventually choose who you work with, the freedom to be located where you want to be. And also, I think that being an entrepreneur is like questioning yourself every day, every day, every day, every day. And not only from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective. You absolutely have to, you know, do personal development to be successful in your business. Otherwise, the business is not growing when you're not growing. It's like intertwined intimately.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious to know what made you become an entrepreneur, because there's always, you know, for me, for example, I grew up with an autoimmune disease. I was a lawyer before and I burnt out, and then I changed and I became a CEO of, you know, a French initiative supporting African entrepreneurs,
Yeah,
and
this is
nonprofit.
where we met.
This is where we met, and it was nonprofit supporting African entrepreneurs. So growing in this governance, bureaucratic governance also of such a structure, and me wanting to become an entrepreneur started my first business. Actually, I started it in 2016. I was still a lawyer, and it was called Startup Altitude, and it was an accelerator. We ran events around emerging markets in Algeria, Nigeria, Morocco, to select startups and do some venture building and help them raise money. And it lasted 1 year and it failed. The second business was cosmetics, and it's still my dream to have a cosmetics brand.
I
And
didn't know that. Okay.
I mean, it's coming very strongly now because I've been in
Okay.
Thailand, visiting, you know, flower farms, and a product-based business is ultimately what I want to do. And I put it aside because I really believe that there are seasons where I'm not one of, you know, the entrepreneurs who are, or the coaches who are like, you start now, I have to start now and everything. Especially as women, there are seasons, and it's important to know which seasons we're in. So when we go into business, we just go all in and we commit to this because it really asks everything from us. Being an entrepreneur is, I mean, it's either you go all in or you don't go, because because it is a life transforming journey. It's life
Yeah.
in itself. So yeah, are you ready to go all in? Because if you're, there are women who do it, but if you're having kids, or, you know, buying a house, or at the beginning of a relationship, or anything, or if you're growing something else in your life and you want to start a business, it is very likely to just take all your attention and draw it to go, like, everything go right there. And do you have the support to jump right in, you know?
What made me become an entrepreneur ultimately was in my so I worked as an employee, right, in my job before I did this on my own, and I was subject to decisions and circumstances that kept me from thriving, to attain my full potential. And I was very conscious of what was happening, so it was extremely frustrating for me. And there was an intellectual journey to this, which at one point I was like, okay, am I going to take the responsibility on for myself to create myself an environment where I can thrive to the extent that I want to? Or am I happy to compromise on my growth and continue to have the security of being an employee? And I made the choice. at a very complicated moment in my life where I didn't have much money on my account, to take on the responsibility for my own growth. And that was a very, very conscious decision without really knowing what I was doing, though. Because when I look back at it right now, the risk that I took, I had a couple of K on my account, no backup whatsoever. I had 6 months of a living, and I was like, I need to, there's no room for failure. Like I have to thrive. Probably if I had to redo it, and I will not, if I had to redo it, I would have probably made sure I would have more financial backup. But hey, just like somehow I survived. It's okay. I wasn't very rich for a long time, but it's okay. It was worth the investment. But ultimately, I think it was about, taking the responsibility for myself and for my own growth, really.
Yeah, I think the responsibility part is big because a lot of the drive of becoming entrepreneur is freedom. It's the most, it was my motivator, my number one value. And when I talk to young entrepreneurs, which I do on a daily basis when I travel, because I support African entrepreneurs, the first response is always freedom, financial freedom, but also just the freedom to own our results, to be in ownership of our lives, to the freedom to wake up at a time we decide to work with the people we actually like working with, and the freedom to choose on every level, in every direction. It's all often the motivator. But freedom comes with responsibility, and it's
and a price. Yeah.
And the price. And it's with big, big responsibility, because if we don't have total ownership of our voice, of what we build, of our businesses, we can't go there, because as employees, we actually hide behind the hindrances I used to hide behind the hindrances I was confronted to. I was like, oh, but I can't, and the governance and the thing, and I haven't been able to, and I had to own the decisions I wasn't behind. I had to be in ownership or the face of decisions that weren't mine. It was very uncomfortable and I didn't feel in integrity in my work and on a daily basis. So that was one of the reasons of the burnout. But at some point it's more comfortable than owning it all. And when you realize, oh, okay, you want the freedom now, what are you going to do about it? How's it going to look like?
Yeah. I think that often people mistake that. I think that it's like the entrepreneurship is very glorified. It's a choice, right? Freedom comes with big responsibilities. And then, right now I have a team, so I don't only have responsibility for myself, but also for the team to a certain extent. So, as long as you're okay to take that on, fine. But, it's a conscious choice that you need to think about. So we obviously both women entrepreneurs. We're both feminists, if I may say so. For you, from a gender lens perspective, what are the main learnings so far as a female entrepreneur?
I think
it's like I was writing this question, I was asking myself, like, what am I going to answer to that?
It's big because on every level. So historically, the workplace was designed by men for men because we weren't there. Just, that's historically. We're not even in feminist mode when we say that. The workplace, as we know it, especially in the corporate world, was designed by men for men. And as feminists, especially first generation feminists, they conformed to that. And the discourse and the speech around and the advocacy was like, we are so equal that we can do exactly the same thing in the same rhythm at the same pace without really bringing a new face to the corporate world, because they had to. So they, integrated this corporate world in a way that had to be very conformed, because otherwise they wouldn't make it within that system, because that's how systems work, right? And we can apply it also to minorities. And some point when in my career, because I didn't last a lot, very long time as a lawyer or afterward in the corporate world, is especially that I had an autoimmune disease to manage while working, and the burnout. I realized that my body wasn't functional in these systems. It
Mm.
was that my body was commodified in a way that wasn't sustainable. And if I wanted to thrive in my life as a human being and be fulfilled, the intellectual stimulation wasn't enough. The contact and being perceived a certain way, and the status that came with being a lawyer or being the COO wasn't enough for me to thrive and really feel fulfilled in my life. And a lot of more women actually than men are doing the work on the personal development part, more from the fulfillment lens and the body-based lens. So one of the biggest skill I learned was using my body as a compass, because our bodies know better than the stories we tell
So
ourselves.
much, so much. I can so relate to what you're saying because I'm working in corporate finance, like corporate finance and tech. It's like the more masculine is probably not, I don't know if there's any more male code driven industries than those. And actually, I'm not dismissing it per se because I think I've learned enormously from the men that I work with, in a sense that I was able to work on my female, how could I put that? On my female characteristics and enhance them by adding up male characteristics to it. But I think that what you're saying about, intuition and the body and, what the way I feel about a sales meeting or the way I feel about something, I've been very dismissive about this. And I think as a female entrepreneur, throughout my journey, I was like, okay, maybe I need to listen a little bit more about, what my intuition is telling me, because that's a valuable asset. And I don't think it's only a valuable asset to women. I think it's also a valuable asset to men. But, I think as a woman, it was very important to me to reconnect with that part of myself, even working in corporate finance. And it's still a journey, and it's a journey that I started thanks to you, actually, because we had a conversation about this a while ago, and then I just started to think about it and little by little connect, and I realized, getting back to the thriving part, it's like the more I connect, the more I thrive. It's systematic. It's like there's no secret. The more I walk the path of me being aligned with myself and, like not ignoring what I feel and not ignoring my intuition, like, that doesn't feel right. I don't know why, but like, let's just stick with it and explore it a little bit. The more successful I become.
Yeah. It's really magnetic. I think our leadership is our truest voice, and our bodies, they send the cues before we compute, and we have we have the full concepts in our mind. So if we learn how to listen, because we unlearned, we don't know, most of us don't know how to connect to that part of ourselves without being afraid that it would create chaos. So it's biological. Just to give a little bit of insight, like a male or a masculine hormonal cycle is 24 hours, so they can function on a linear way, because when they wake up in the morning, there's this spike of testosterone, and it works all day long, and in
I'm
the
so
evening yeah, and in the evening it just gets down, so they
I'm
can,
like, I want to have that too.
yeah, so they can wind down and then go to sleep, and when they wake up, it's a reset for the next day, so they can function on a linear way.
Oh God.
Yes. And it's really good to know it. Like for me, it was such a liberation to know it. For women, it's 28 days of hormonal cycles. So the cycles they go through in 24 hours, we go through very similar cycles, but in 28 days. And I mean, every phase of the cycle mobilizes different neural pathways. So we don't function the same way on our first week. Second week, when we ovulate, we would be more keen to communicate
Yeah.
into the world. And the third week would be more, every week, or every week is a phase. So ovulatory phase, follicular, menstrual, and so on. luteal phase when it's really increases after the cycle and all of these things. And knowing how our cycles function and just applying it, like even on the managerial level. I had a team of women only. We knew when how our cycles would function. So if you're in the same workspace, it will very, likely sync. But my team was completely remote, so we weren't synced. But we knew when each one, and we had all the organization around it, like taking the calls, what we would mobilize, and just acknowledging the cycles. And our level of energy around that made us more productive. And you were talking about thriving and more successful. It made us more successful. Like we worked less than before. We made more money. We were better with our clients, and we increased performance through our syncing to our bodies. And it is a conversation we should have, not the men for us. Like we should
No,
have.
yeah,
We are
absolutely.
with it, yeah.
Okay.
And they listen. They listen when you put it in
Oh yeah.
performance lens, under the performance lens. They listen because we have
Oh, and you know
allies.
what? Even if you don't put it in a performance lens, I feel like maybe that's the type of man that surrounds me now, that, I'm aligned with myself. But even if you don't put it in a performance lens, they still listen. Like, I think it's also great to see that there's this type of conversation that we can have now with guys our age, but even older ones, that are like open to actually acknowledge, like, yeah, there's a human being next to me that functions a little bit differently. And that doesn't mean it's worse or better, it's just different. And it also brings something else to the table, right?
Yeah. And the amazing thing is we're having conversations that weren't even possible 5 years ago. We're not
I
even talking
know, I'm so
about
happy
things like
about this.
5 years, 10 years. We're talking about things in places where there was so much shame around these topics. So
Yeah.
much shame. We've been conditioned to feel so ashamed about these. Like saying I am a woman, I have needs, and my body undergoes a very specific 28 or 30 days cycle, was a subject of shame. And now I can, in my world at least, I'm not saying all women in all worlds, but in my world, it became really possible to talk about it. And it's a given that it's a parameter that we need to acknowledge as such and work around it.
You know what? It's like I'm at a stage where it's like we doing high-end consulting services. I'm expected to function 24/7, and fair enough, because our motto is always strive for excellence. So we really want to be in that space. It's because we are wired in that way. That's what we like. That's what we like to provide. So this is also the positioning of the company, right? But right now I'm at the stage of my life where I'm like, okay, this is how I want to position myself. This is what I need to be able to function like that. And this is how I create the environment or the conditions for me to really always strive for excellence.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question. What is good leadership for you?
For me, good leadership is embodied leadership. And I'm going to elaborate on that because I've been talking the body as the compass. But we've been educated to value performance leadership, and we confuse performance leadership with performative leadership, where we perform authority, we perform power, we perform power over others, and a certain way of leading that for me is completely obsolete today. I'm not saying that it didn't work at some point, it did, and it's completely ingrained in many of our systems, but it is obsolete. And when we talk about embodied leadership, it's that it's more being more in integrity with ourselves and our core being. And many of us, and this is a conversation we're having in many leadership spaces, it's the conversation of purpose and meaning in what we do, and that we find through the body. When we know how to listen to the emotions, to what's going on in the body, to the cues, to just feeling uncomfortable with a decision in negotiation where we accept things, or our boundaries are porous, are not, like we can stick with the boundaries. All of this can be felt on a bodily level before being conceptualized. Our boundaries, when they're crossed, it's a discomfort in the body first. When someone says something racist in a table and we don't say something and we stay silent, or something sexist and we're there and we just, feel the microaggression without reacting. This is a self-betrayal feeling that can be felt in the body because
Very
we're not
imminent.
in integrity, you
You have
know?
an imminent physical reaction.
Yeah.
Experience
And
that.
sometimes we can't react because we get to choose our battles. That's fine, you know. But having just being smart enough, oh, I feel really icky in here. I don't like interacting with this person because this person makes me feel this way, and I'm not able to react because there is this power dynamic where I still have to comply. And I realize that the more we acknowledge that, the less we have to do it actually, because the less fear there is to really express ourselves. But there's a gap between acknowledging it and really being fully expressed in spaces where the same people have been exercising power for such a long time, you know?
Mm.
So for me, good leadership is this leadership that is embodied, where we feel where we're not in integrity and where we're in this progression move where there is no one truth, not one system that functions, but there is this very evolutionary process where we acknowledge something, we work on it, we evolve, and we know that it's going to be better the next time. On a personal level, on a team level, and on an organizational level. And now we have framework and methodologies that were developed for that. Through, embodied leadership is a framework. I developed like an entire process called Omnia. It is a somatic process to acknowledge, like a protocol where we go and acknowledge and just unleash our expression through, the throat, and we open the throat, so we open our expression and things like that. We have tools and frameworks. Same for emergent strategy, where you bring emergent leadership, how it looks like, how do you interact with your team, how do you acknowledge who they are, how do you design the roles within your organization, and how do you grow from there. And we have the framework now. The thing, or what we are navigating, is the transition, and how are we implementing and embodying it today as a leader, and how are we making our organization and corporation transition to that model from the old one, because we know that old structures die hard. Die hard, and they resist. Of course, the old resist. Old structures want to stick around, and we're bringing the new. So it needs to be. It's a practice, and in 20 years, it's going to be completely different. A different
Yeah.
conversation.
Once again, I had to think hard about what that means for me. And I'm going little bit back into my personal experience and what never worked for me. And what never worked for me was authority based on governance structure. It's like, just because somebody said he was senior to me, it never worked out for me to, just being a leader by definition, actually. Authority in general, I'm not a big believer in that. I think that a person who has the knowledge, both from a human perspective and from, purely factual perspective, should take the lead, and whoever that then is in this specific situation. And there's another thing that I think is very important for me being a leader. I need to adapt to the people that I lead. It's not the other way around. Meaning, like, my team, they're like very different personalities, right? As much as they need to stick to, the company's kind of goals, etc., it's on me to go towards them, to identify, okay, this is what they need to thrive. This is what they need to be comfortable. This is what they like to do. This is how I can, increase their, productivity, motivation, etc., ultimately their well-being, right? This is where I need to go. So for me, like, leadership or management is more a support function than actually being on top of everything.
Yeah, I love that, because you're bringing also the piece because for me, leadership is, there's the self-leadership part, and then the management leadership, and how you lead yourself, even as a human being. It's not even intricate with management and entrepreneurship. It's like how you lead yourself and how you lead others, and how you're heard in, in your community, and how is your role identified? Are you playing the role that is emergent as being your own, beyond your organization? And what you're saying about the team, I really like it, because we're really over obedient leadership, like, the leadership of obedience and
One side.
submission, and it's over, it's done, we're not there anymore. And it's more about valuing people and onboarding them into the vision and co-creating with them. We're not into the leadership of
Yeah.
imposing anything on any people and expecting them
Yeah,
to
I
do
think that
the
the
way.
co-creating thing, that's like a big deal. Co-creating um, with a common vision, with a common motivation, with, you know, great intellectual challenges, but like, so, you know, around one thing that we all want to co-create. That's a very big, it's the purpose-driven activity, if you want to say so. I think that's very.
Yeah. And your team will you will thrive if you look at the people for who they are and acknowledge what they can bring as themselves.
Yep. And not
Because
to try and fit them to somewhat of a mold that is
yeah,
not theirs ultimately.
yeah. And our companies grow so much when we allow people to be themselves within the company, because our vision is a part of the block. But when you hire someone, they bring a whole other dimension that you couldn't even see, you know?
Exactly. All right, Soumeya, we wanted to keep it short and finally didn't turn out to be short. Anyway, I could probably talk with you about those subjects for another 2.5 hours. So.
Thank you so much. That was such a good conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I shall see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.